Hi there, and welcome to Roundtable on Telile Community Television. I'm your host, Adam Cook. This week, we're taking a deep dive into changes to the municipal boundaries that were recently hammered out by Richmond Municipal Councillors. The new boundary system still has to go to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board for approval, but in the meantime, we're going to catch up with two members of Richmond Council, specifically Warden and District 4 Councillor Amanda Mombourquette and District 1 Councillor Shawn Samson, about the changes that were agreed upon by councillors at a special meeting that took place at the end of January. And we're also going to catch up on some recent items from the Richmond Municipal Council table, including a few that have to do with tourism development in the county. But we begin with Warden Amanda Mombourquette. She has worked with the 4 other municipal councillors to try to put together a new electoral map for Richmond County, and you're going to hear what she has to say right now in this interview that we conducted at her office via Zoom. And now we're pleased to have here with us to explain just what exactly happened on the evening of Tuesday, January the 31st, and where we go from here in terms of Richmond's municipal boundary review. The Warden of the County from her office at the Richmond Municipal Building in Arishat, Amanda Mombourquette. Amanda, thank you for joining me on Roundtable today.
Oh, my pleasure, Adam.
So I wanted to begin by asking you about the nature of the discussion on Tuesday night, January the 31st at the special council meeting, because when I attended the January 23rd regular council meeting that brought this up, it seemed like there was a lot of willingness to have some give and take in terms of the individual councillors and the individual districts. Did you find that that carried over to Tuesday the 31st to the special council meeting? Basically, how did it go?
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely did. The discussion it was a really productive one. We had given some instructions from our last meeting to the consultant to kind of make some certain changes. And what they brought back was, I think, a solution that, that everybody could see made a lot of sense for a whole variety of reasons. So it was an extremely productive discussion that we had when we reviewed that final mapping and we reviewed the final Stantec report in full. And I think, I couldn't be more proud that we were able to come to a plan that makes sense for the county and have unanimous support from councillors on it. It's just does my heart good.
So let's look at the individual districts. And I know that on January 23rd, one of the priorities that council wanted to address in this latest redrawing of the map was potential splitting of communities. And of course, we see that in Almadam, we see that in Arishat, and there was some concern about whether the two districts 1 and 2 were being equitably split and allowing for representation of all sorts, not just individual communities, but also cultural communities as well. So how do you feel that this new map that's being put forward to the UARB expresses that?
I don't want to call the districts imaginary lines, but essentially that's what they are. They are lines that humans draw on a piece of paper, that really it's going to split communities no matter where you put the line. Unless you draw one big circle around it, it's going to have that kind of an impact, right? So certainly, the feedback that we had gotten about districts 1 and 2, though, were that, members of the public were sort of really concerned to seeing that, if we look at voter parity only, look at the numbers only as the most important criteria, that the District 2 was going to be pushing far onto the mainland and almost cutting off a piece of, District 3 from another part of District 3. And so there were some serious concerns about that we had heard from the public. And that came through, I think, in that last round of surveys, because we saw the shift from, a kind of support for a 7-member council over to a 5-member council. It certainly came through in the open houses in the information sessions that we held. We held 6 of those in January, looking at those voter parity numbers kind of as the primary criteria. And so, the end result for us as a council was that we basically restored Lennox Passage to District 3, the Lewisdale area, which means we have 2 councillors on Almadam, and we shifted Arishat is the biggest population base, right? The biggest base of electors here. And so we shifted where the line kind of is drawn that splits the community of Arishat between District 1 and 2 to make that a little bit more even between between those two districts. So we were shooting for a voter parity of 10% or plus or minus 10% or lower for each district. We weren't able to achieve that, but we still felt, I think that the voter parity numbers are at like closer to minus 12% for one councillor, minus 13 for another, so something like that. So it makes a lot more sense. It's close to that target, but really that community of interest that is Almadam, we wanted to prioritize that, and so I think both councillors were on Almadam we're really pleased with that outcome. I'm really pleased with that outcome. I feel the people of Lennox Passage will be pleased with that outcome because, of course, they identify very closely with the community of Bluesdale.
Yes, indeed. Are you able to tell me where the line is now in terms of Arishat? Which district gets what?
So I believe the line now is kind of the New Horizons Senior Center area. What it will shift to, though, is kind of more District 1 would kind of end at Binet's Lane, a certain spot on Veterans Memorial Drive. So it shifts a little bit to make those two districts sort of more even keel in terms of the number of electors that are represented in each one.
All right, well, let's move on to districts 3, 4, and 5. And specifically, I wanted to get some clarification from you about what's happening on the west end of District 4, your district, but also on the east end, where we had community Grande-Greve that had its invisible line going through it as well. But there's also been some movement of communities such as Lynch's River and Thibaultville over on the west side. Can you explain what's going on there?
Yeah, so well, let's start with kind of the Thibaultville River Bourgeois area. So when in 2014, when we last conducted a review, would have been obviously a prior council to us, but when the UARB made their final decision, they imposed a 5-member council solution. And I think they used typical landmarks to do that. They used the highway, which, to kind of divide between District 3 and 4, which on paper kind of makes some sense. But it did kind of cut the folks in Thibaultville off from, they were voting for a councillor in Lewisdale, Whiteside, Evanston, so it was a little bit less connected, where I think they identify more with the River Bourgeois area. And it's not a lot of voters there, but every vote matters, right? And every elector wants to feel connected to the community that they feel, that they would be voting for an elected representative for, right? So I think it was just a small fix, but just one that would allow them now to be back part of that kind of River Bourgeois area, which is represented in District 4. So that was a really minor change, not going to be impactful when it comes to achieving voter parity, like I said, because it's such a small number of electors, but it's a piece of, around community that we really wanted to get done. And of course, I know in the last election, even from trying to campaign,
Yes.
trying to figure out the Grande-Greve Road was a challenge, depending on how far down you lived. And, it just didn't make any sense. So we wanted to repair that issue. So when we looked at saying, okay, we'll put all of Grande-Greve Road in one district or another, and then of course doing the change to put Lennox Passage back into the sort of Lewisdale, Whiteside, Evans, that District 3 area, one impacts all of the others. It's like dominoes, right? And so when we made that change, we kind of had to take another look at the voter parity in District 3, District 4, and District 5 to kind of together to make those as close to target as we possibly could. And so what we ended up doing was we just said, well, elector wise, the community of Grande-Greve is about, depending on which end you live in, 2 to 5 minutes away from, St. Peter's. Would it make more sense to add those folks to District 4? And then, but if we do that, we have to move another group out. And so District 4 at the time, I think, contained part of Lynch's River, so we moved that over to District 5. And what that did, essentially, Adam, was that it got both District 3 and District 4 a little closer to that voter parity target. It removed that issue of, depending on where you live in Grande-Greve or along that particular road, like now you know where you're going to be voting next time. But it also took into consideration the vast geographic area that is District 5. And it's about almost 50% of the landmass or about 50% of the landmass of Richmond County. So we were really trying to make sure that that was as close to the vote, that parity or below that parity, because it takes a lot longer to serve the constituents of that district, because of the distance that people have to travel. You can drive from one end of District 4 to the other in 10 minutes or, 15 minutes. You definitely are going to need more time than that in District 5. And that makes a big difference to a councillor who's trying to do, their best to represent all of the constituents in the district. So that's why we made that move with Grande-Greve, even though it's a lot more voters to put in, to put in District 4. We kind of offset it a little bit with moving Lynch's River, but we didn't want to move all of Grande-Greve to District 4 and to District 5, because it would have meant way too many people given the size of that geographic area. So yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you as well, you've mentioned communities of interest a couple of times, especially in terms of Thibaultville and River Bourgeois. What's interesting to me is not only what happened in this redrawn map, but what didn't happen. And there was a scenario at one point that had the community of St. George's Channel moving into District 4 to help balance out the numbers. You yourself said at the January 23rd council meeting, and I quote, "Sometimes you can get sucked in by the numbers." So it looks like council made what seems to be both a pragmatic and even a compassionate move to keep the communities of St. George's Channel and Dundee together in this redrawn District 3. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, and you're 100% right, Adam. There were scenarios that all of us were looking at that would see that community maybe move into District 4. And I think, don't get me wrong, I think there are strong ties between the community of St. Peter's and St. George's Channel, and I am going to put a plug in for their breakfast, on the third Sunday of every month, because it's like so awesome. Please
don't call it brunch. Yes,
right. But at the end of the day, we do know there's a strong connection with Dundee and St. George's Channel, and it doesn't take you can recognize that immediately. And so when we were looking at the numbers, it just, sure, math wise, maybe it made sense to kind of move that over, but at the end of the day, we were able to achieve those similar sort of targets that are just outside the UARB's target of plus or minus 10% by not moving it. So it just made sense to keep them with Dundee. And things may change in the future. Population may decline dramatically, grow dramatically. This is not a forever thing. This is the best decision that we could make with the information that we have right now. And so, we're trying as much as we can to make sure that it makes sense for the people who live here, because, I stand by that comment. You can get sucked in by the numbers and it feels like an exercise in math, but at the end of the day, this is people's right to practice their democratic right, and this is what we need to keep in mind. So we were trying to keep that front and center in our line of thinking the whole time, I would say.
Now, obviously, you wanted to keep constituents' concerns in the line of thinking as well, and I know that this was a busy January for all of you. You mentioned earlier 6 open houses all over the county. And I want to speak to that, but also speak to the survey process. The 2 councillors for Almadam, Shawn, Samson, Michael Digdon, both expressing concerns about the reliability of the internet survey. And there had been some concerns as well over whether more hard copy surveys should have been sent out to county residents. So I'll bring that around to the question, how confident are you that the concerns and the wishes of Richmond County residents from one district all the way to all the others are being represented in what council finally put together earlier this week?
Yeah, so I'm feeling confident now. I was not feeling confident at the 1st of January. Surveys are a tool in a toolbox that we use to consult with the public. Frankly, Adam, I don't think it would be feasible, just even logistically, to send out we knew that this was going to be at least a 2-survey piece, right? To try to send those surveys out to every household, like a paper copy, and then trying to get them back. And did they submit it online as well as pay? Like, I don't think that would have necessarily solved it. I think we could have done a better job on communications and maybe done a little information mail drop into everybody's mailboxes, you know what I mean? To say, point them to, okay, call your councillor if you want. If you don't have, if you don't want to fill it out online, or there's a whole lot of other things we could have done. So I'm super excited that we're working on a communications plan that will standardize this kind of thing for us. Lessons we're learning along the way. But at the end of the day, a survey is only one tool in the toolbox. And I will tell you right now, I put a whole lot more stock into the conversations we have one-on-one as councillors with our community members, and a whole lot more stock on those open houses information sessions where people are, spending some face time learning about the context, right? And that's, to me, like, as much as it's difficult to tell on any survey, well, did the same person fill this out 10 times? Or is this a unique person every time? And yeah, you can track IP addresses, but all that tells you is the house. You don't know who's at the keyboard. So yeah, there's all those kind of technical concerns. But my primary concern with the surveys at the end of the day was that we're asking members of the public for their opinion, but we're not providing sufficient context. Basically, maybe we should have done a video to explain what the implications would be of the feedback and the decisions that are being made, because it felt very much out of context. And that's a big thing I noticed with the open houses was, suddenly people had all these questions, and it absolutely influenced what they thought we should do. I mean, heck yeah, everybody wants more representation. So let's have more members of council. That's going to cost more money, most likely. That's, it's going to have a whole pile of other implications, right? So I think I'm feeling very confident now, to come back to your question, that we've achieved a solution that's a right fit for Richmond County, and that I think residents would generally support. The 1st of January, I wasn't feeling that way. So I'm pretty happy with where we're at, and pretty proud that we got there so quickly.
Even in the digital age, sometimes nothing beats taking it to the streets. So there you are.
You're 100% right.
Yeah. So now that we have gone through all of this, now what? What happens in terms of the submission to the UARB? When should we expect a decision from the board? What goes on now?
Okay, so I'll speak number one to kind of the process wise. So I do want to mention right off the bat, this process is a mandated process. We didn't have a choice in doing a boundary review study. We had to do a boundary review study. It's written right in the legislation, the provincial legislation for municipal bodies in Nova Scotia, to do one every 8 years. Did one in 2014, 2022, we had to kick off another one. So this wasn't something that council thought would be just, oh, that's a good idea. You know what I mean? This was something that we were required to do. I've had lots of questions about that, so I wanted to make sure that was clear. The other thing that's, I think, that's important to remember is that what council has decided here, it sounds like it's very much a decision, and it is, but it's a decision on a recommendation. So what we will put forward now is an application to the UARB. Our deadline is February 15th. We'll put forward an application to the UARB with a recommendation of, that 5 councillors will continue to represent Richmond County, and the boundaries that we just discussed. These are the boundaries of the various districts. The UARB has the final say. So they could come back and they could say, no, we think you should have fewer councillors or more councillors, or no, we don't agree that these are good reasons. Go back, we're going to redraw the boundaries based on parity. They could decide anything, really. They have certain criteria that they need to consider. That voter parity target of plus or minus 10% that I talked about, that is something they take very seriously, making sure that one councillor doesn't have hundreds and hundreds more constituents in one district as opposed to another one. So they take that very seriously. We're making a strong case. I think that community of interest needs to be high on that priority list of considerations, and that we are only slightly outside of the parity on several of the districts. And the Stantec report supports that conclusion as well. So we're feeling pretty confident we'll be successful, but at the end of the day, they make the decision. So we will file the application by February 15th, Adam, and then they will deliberate, make a decision, and what they will do is they will decide on a couple of things. Is this a substantive change? And if it is, then it goes through a much longer process. If it's not something they would consider a substantive change, then it's a much shorter process. So I can't really give you a timeline on a response from them.
Sure.
Just knowing that, in past experiences, depending on the level of change you're putting forward, that will determine the length of time.
And it's worth reminding our viewers as well, too, that the reason we have the current 5 boundaries we have is because the UARB made its decision against the wishes of the previous 10-member council in 2015, the majority of which had voted to maintain 10 districts. There were 4 that submitted a minority position that 5 or 7 districts would be better, but the UARB in the end made the final decision. So
that's right.
That could happen as well, too. They could decide anything.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty confident that that's not going to happen because, for a variety of reasons. Number one, we are so close to parity. We're like 2 or 3% out, right? For on 4 of the districts. So that community of interest is a pretty strong argument. And the UARB is mandated to consider that. So they consider the voter parity, they consider the community of interest, which we've talked about. They consider the geographic area, which we've talked about, particularly with District 5, right? And they consider population density, which we've sort of referred to when we talk about areas like St. Peter's and Petit de Gras, like smaller geographic because there's many people in it. So they are required to consider those things, as well in their decision. And that's why those are the things we considered in ours.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground as I expected we might. Amanda, did you want to add anything else about all this just before we wrap up?
Yeah, just again want to say this has been an extremely collaborative process. That we've had some hiccups. We had a little bit of a data error on the second survey that the consultant had put out, and so we were really glad to be able to get the extension from the end of December to the middle of February to really double down on making sure there's accurate data out there and on our communications as well. We put that extra time to good use. And I also wanted to say, especially after the 2014 experience where, you just need a majority of votes to get something through. That really hasn't been the approach that this council has taken with most things. We're a group that's more looking to build consensus when we can. We don't always agree and we're not always going to have a 5-0 vote. You know what I mean? Sure. But, and certainly that hasn't been the case in many other decisions, but it was wonderful that it was the case in this decision. I think it makes our case to the UARB stronger. And I think it shows that we've come to a decision that really makes sense. So instead of worrying about the old days, you know what I mean, where we like majority rules, and of course it still does, it was really wonderful to be able to find a path to consensus forward. So.
Well, we appreciate you taking some time to walk us all through this, and we'll see how things go with the UARB. But in the meantime, Warden Mombourquette, thank you very much for giving me some time here for Roundtable on Telile Community Television. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome, Adam. And I also will mention that if anybody would like to see the Stantec report, I've done a summary video, the press release. It's all available at richmondcounty.ca, along with some FAQs if people have questions about things. And of course, you can reach out to your councillor if you do as well.
All right, we'll direct people toward the county website as well, too.
Great.
Amanda Mombourquette is the Warden of Richmond County. We've been speaking to her via Zoom from her office at the Richmond Municipal Building in Arishat. Stay tuned for more of Roundtable in just a moment. We'll have more on the new municipal boundary map for Richmond County in just a few minutes with District 1 Councillor Shawn Samson. But right now, we're going to take a breather from that discussion by looking at some other recent items from the Richmond Municipal Council table. And the next 3 items actually have to do with tourism development in the county. One of them has to do with a popular look-off for both tourists and locals alike here in Almadam, specifically the Babbins Hill look-off, which is located just on the outskirts of Arishat heading into West Arishat. You're going to hear right now some discussion that took place at 2 recent council meetings regarding Babbins Hill and the possibility of expanding the parking lot for the look-off. We're going to hear some discussion from the Municipal Committee of the Whole meeting and also from the Municipal Council meeting that took place on January 23rd. And there's also some footage of interviews with Warden Amanda Mombourquette concerning the Babbins Hill Look-Off. Here's how it all shakes out.
This is related to the Babbins Hill Look-Off. We did have a memo from Chris, so thank you, Chris, for your work on that. And it included some costing information and a bit of a recommendation from staff about potential next steps for the look-off. So, I mean, the recommendation right now is that it be deferred to budget for, for further instruction to staff, because there are going to be some costs associated if we do proceed with work there. So we'll look for a motion to refer the Babbins Hill Look-Off estimates to budget.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Mike Digdon.
I'll second that motion.
Councillor Shawn Samson, thank you. So it is that the estimated cost to carry out the work to expand Babbins Hill Look-Off by 40 meters west and along Highway 206 be deferred to the 2023-2024 budget deliberations. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
The committee discussed Babbins Hill Look-Off. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole that council defer the estimated costs to carry out the work to expand the Babbins Hill Look-Off by 40 meters west along Highway 206 to the 2023-2024 budget deliberations.
Okay, so we have a motion. Could I have a seconder on that, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Digdon. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Right, that motion's carried. So we really don't have I would say, a reliable, a really concrete estimate on cost to do development at Babbins Hill at this point in time. But what we are looking at is trying to make that look-off a little bit more accessible, maybe a little safer, a little bit more room for folks who want to pull off and enjoy that spectacular view. So we do have municipal property there right now, but we also recognize there's some geographical challenges with the drop-off and trees and you name it. So we have asked staff to continue to investigate, but essentially needing to refer that to budget, because we do need some concrete numbers to know what is and maybe isn't within our ability financially to deal with. We want to do sizable, chunks that we can manage, I guess, and I think that's the whole purpose of this planning exercise, is to make sure that we're not creating a grandiose plan that we don't have the financial resources to support. So, yeah.
Parking the big issue there?
Yeah, parking's definitely an issue there. Like I said, it's gorgeous. It's a beautiful spot. I mean, the sunsets are fantastic, and I think we want to be looking at Richmond County with a tourism lens whenever we can, and so we are generally supportive, but we need to make sure it's within our financial means to do as well.
Now, it's not just in Isle Madame where there's some development happening that could be attractive to tourism. You're going to hear now some discussion regarding a potential cottage and cabin development in the western Richmond County community of Walkerville. It came up just a couple of weeks ago at Richmond Council's regular meeting on January the 23rd. Here's the discussion that took place, followed by some commentary from Warden Amanda Mombourquette.
The first is to approve entering into a development agreement for 4 tourist cabins and cottages on Lot 18, PID 751-44063 on Orion Crescent, Walkerville, Richmond County. So we'd be looking for a motion at this point that council give the second reading to approve entering into the development agreement for the property as described. So, get a mover on that, please?
I will.
Thank you, Councillor Melanie Samson. Could I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Shawn Samson. Any further discussion on that item? Okay, so there being none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Where are the properties located and what's the significance there?
Yeah, so we had 2 recommendations come forward from our Planning Advisory Committee, essentially the first one was to look at a location in Walkerville where, because of the current zoning, a development agreement would be required in order for something like the tourist accommodations that are being proposed to be able to go forward. So that first issue that we dealt with was was to provide second reading approval to allow the development agreement, to approve the development agreement to allow 4 tourism sort of cottages to be built on a particular location in Walkerville.
I'm just curious about that because that whole area, Walkerville, Evanston, Cleveland, it's a beautiful spot, but not necessarily known as a tourism destination or a tourism community. Your thoughts on the idea that this development could help change that?
Well, I think just like a lot of parts of Richmond County, it's a hidden gem, and there's no time like the present to be changing, the tourism spotlight and making it shine on these wonderful little places like that. So I'm excited to see what happens with that development, and would certainly be supportive of their efforts going forward.
And just before we leave the tourism section of this week's edition of Roundtable, we're going to revisit discussion that's recently been held on a new Cape Breton Island tourism marketing levy. The previous levy was seen to be too low to be able to catch up with rising costs and rising tourism levies in other parts of Nova Scotia. So the CEO of the Destination Cape Breton Association, Terry Smith, visited municipal councils around Cape Breton in the fall to try to get some support from them for a proposal to amend the Tourism Marketing Levy Act of the province of Nova Scotia. Well, those amendments have gone through, and now it's up to individual municipalities to create their own tourism marketing levy bylaws, which will give them the opportunity to be able to raise or lower the levies in their own municipalities. Richmond County is one of the latest to take care of that. Let's take a look at the discussion of the marketing levy situation right now.
It is an item that was added from Terry Smith, the CEO of Destination Cape Breton, regarding the marketing levy update. And really, essentially, we had passed a motion some time ago to support their recommendations, as you know. The idea is that we want a consistent bylaw drafted on Cape Breton Island among all 5 municipalities. And Destination Cape Breton is proposing taking the same approach that they took last time by hiring a lawyer and basically taking a lead on that. And in essence, it would be to update the current bylaw with the 3 amendments that councils have approved. So it sounded from Terry's communication like the other councils approved the same amendments that we did. So the outcome we're looking for here is that we would refer this item to bylaw and policy now, so that the matter can go directly there for a review and recommendation once Terry's information comes back from DCBA. So would councillors be okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so could I have a motion then to refer the municipality marketing levy bylaw 60 to the bylaw and policy committee for review and recommendation?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Melanie Samson. Could I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Shawn Samson. Any further discussion on that item? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, that motion is carried.
I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole that council refer the municipality of the County of Richmond marketing levy bylaw number 60 to the Bylaw Policy Committee for review and recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder on that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Shawn Samson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion's carried.
And now, as promised, we're going to return to our discussion about Richmond County's new electoral map for municipal districts. Here is District 1 Councillor Shawn Samson explaining how the new map is going to affect Districts 1 and 2 here in Almadam, and about the process that went into coming up with the new map. And we're pleased to welcome back to Telile Community Television for our Roundtable series. The Councillor for District 1 for Richmond County, Shawn Samson, is here to help shed some light on the new municipal boundary makeup for the county. Councillor Samson, thank you for joining us here today.
Yeah, thanks very much, Adam, and thanks for inviting me.
That's no problem at all. So we're just a few days removed from the special council meeting that was held to try to iron out exactly what the municipality was going to present to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. Before we get into the details of what's been tweaked and what's been changed in terms of boundaries and where people are going to vote, I want to ask you, what was the mood like at that meeting, and how do you feel you and your fellow councillors are right now as you prepare to send this to the UARB?
Yeah, so the mood, Adam, was a sense of maybe relief that the process was over, but also a sense of appreciation for the way the process took place. And what I mean by that is that the appreciation that the warden and our fellow councillors and our CEO had for the way we conducted ourselves during the process, the open discussions we had around the table, and the open discussions we had with the public. And in the end, we found some common ground that hopefully will suit everybody in Richmond County.
So let's take a look now at what you've taken in from the public and how that's translated into the new boundary makeup. And we'll center specifically on Almadam for District 1 and for District 2. So one of the biggest issues that was causing trouble was the boundary line splitting the community of Arishat between District 1 and District 2. Right now, it's pretty much at the New Horizons for Seniors Club over on the main highway. But can you tell me a little bit about how the boundary line for Arishat specifically has changed now, and how that will help things out in terms of being able to give community representation to the people here?
Yeah, for sure, Adam. So, yeah, you're correct in saying that District 1 and District 2 split right at the New Horizon Senior Club on the main road in Arishat. So what happens is that anything eastbound towards Petit and those places is District 1. Anything past that heading towards West Arishat is Councillor Dicton's area. So when we first started the process, there was talk of community division to the point where people were like wondering if all of Arishat should have been represented by one particular councillor.
Yes.
And that was the approach at the start when we first came out with proposed districts and what to present to the UARB board. So it was proposed that I would go towards Babbins Hill, so to the end of Arishat, start of West Arishat, where I would gain 170 voters from Councillor 2, Michael Digdon. But because of that, he would have had to branch off more towards the mainland side of things. So right now, Councillor Digdon is presently doing Lennox Passage.
Yes.
It would have seen him head towards Lower River, Evanston, Whiteside, to gain those 170 votes that he just lost in to me, right? So in the end, that's where the complication arose. Not complication, I shouldn't say, because it wasn't too complicated. It was, but in the end, there was concern for a councillor from the island heading that far into the mainland. People didn't have too much of a problem with Lennox Passage. It's just 38 voters. But, when you branch off into Whiteside, Evanston, those areas, people were kind of concerned that.
And I know there was some concern at one of the open houses that I attended at La Picasse in Petit de Gras that was brought up that you could see a municipal councillor representing Western and Northern Almadam in District 2 actually being elected from Lennox Passage, from Whiteside, Cleveland, from that general area.
That's correct, exactly. So, and they have every right to run in that district. Right? It doesn't matter, where you're from. You could have been from the north side, you could have been from West Arishat, or from the mainland. And so then that would have seen Almadam go from 1.5 councillors or 2 councillors down to 1 councillor. And again, not saying that the mainland councillor wouldn't have did a very good job representing the north side, just people were like, if we can avoid it, maybe we should have just 2 councillors representing Almadam. Right?
Okay. So where does the new boundary line go now?
Yeah, so to go back to the New Horizon senior situation, there was some people saying, maybe we shouldn't have that division with councillors. But we told that resident in question, we said, for me, I am designated as a District 1 councillor for Richmond County. I don't see myself that way, Adam. I see myself as the District 1 councillor. I see myself as a councillor for all of Almadam. And I see myself as a councillor for all of Richmond County, right? So I get calls from the western side of the New Horizon Senior Club. I get calls from the mainland. I visited people in the mainland. So I'm a councillor representing all of Richmond County, right? So having said that, when it came to what we proposed to the UARB board just recently at the January 31st meeting, we were trying to find voter parity to the point where we only have roughly 2,700 voters on Almadam, whereas I had 1,373. I currently have 1,373, and Councillor Digdon currently has 1,313. with what was proposed on the survey, it was proposed that, again, I would take on 170 voters of all Evershed. That would leave me with 1,543 voters, and it would leave Councillor Digdon heading towards the mainland. So what we come up with was, if we're going to get the interests of communities and community priority looked after, we were looking at separating or equally dividing that 2,700 number. So we would represent solely just Almaden, the two of us. So that number, would have been roughly 1,350 each in that range. So it now takes me to Boudreau's lane, it's called.
Yes.
So that's just one lane east of the new horizon. Well, 2 lanes, I should say. So Island Street is the first lane, and Boudreau's is almost right parallel with Island Street. So Councillor Digdon will now take over, if it's accepted. Councillor Digdon in 2024, or whoever the councillor will be, will take on Island Street, heading towards the new horizon, and I will take on Boudreau's lane, heading east towards Peterborough.
Okay.
That's going to pretty much solve the problem. Councillor Digdon is going to gain roughly 43 voters from Island Street, but he's going to lose the 38 voters in Lennox Passage because we're going to give those 38 voters back to the Lewisdale area, which it should be. Their neighboring communities, Lennox Passage and Lewisdale, should be in with District 3. So he's going to lose 38 voters there, gain 43 from me. So in the end, he's going to end up with roughly 13, 20, and I'm going to end up with 1330. So pretty much neck and neck, pretty much even, and that way we'll all represent, the board of us will represent all of that.
All right. And I mean, of course, you've made the distinction that, there's no problem with having a community like Lennox Passage in District 2, but does the concept now that Lennox Passage, if this proposal is accepted by the UARB, would be going to District 3 and be joined right next to Lewisdale, where it's right next to anyway, do you get the sense that having 2 districts now that are completely within the Almaden boundaries might offer some more effective representation for yourself and Councillor Digdon and for anybody that would represent the new District 1 and District 2?
Yeah, I think so, Adam. I mean, and again, not it's never been mainland versus island for me, and hopefully it hasn't been that way for other past councillors and future councillors. It shouldn't be that, but simply there's heritage, there's culture, there's community involvement. The schools, Rocky Bay, Peterborough, Little Lance, Jammers Island, West Evershed. So there's tightly knit communities there, where people are tightly knit together, and their goals for the community are pretty much tightly knit, and they're all on the same page. So for me, it would be easier for 2 councillors to represent all Almaden for sure.
Okay. Now, I spoke to Warden Amanda Mombourquette about this as well, too, and we heard from her earlier in the program. One of the things she suggested to me is that while the municipality was right to go ahead with the kinds of research and surveying that it did, including the recent internet survey, that it felt like the rubber hit the road and these new boundaries really started to come together during the open house process that took place in several communities in January. You and Councillor Digdon hosted a few of these as well here on the island. Do you respond to that the same way? The idea that it was really hearing the people and speaking to them face to face that really helped carve out these new boundaries? That's you hit the nail on the head, and so did the Warden when she says that. That's where the rubber hit the road, and that's where we've seen a turning point at it. So, when it came to the survey, there was I think a total of 3 or 4 surveys. The first couple had, the favorite being 7 councillors. Yes. I think it was like maybe 41 to 42% versus 21 or 22 with 5. But again, those surveys are like click, 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 click. Mm-hmm. Someone could abuse the process. Right. No one was commenting too much. People were just taking the survey, and that was it. And there was concern that, the same IP address could have did. I think there was 106, I said, yeah. So there was 106 people that took that survey.
someone said someone could have did that 106 times. And, chances are that didn't happen, Adam, but it could. The possibility is there.
Yeah.
And if you did find that out and you say, well, the same IP address did those 106 surveys, or let's say you cut it in half and say, well, the same IP address did 50 surveys out of the 106, and you call that out. Well, the person could say, yeah, well, I had my family over for Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
I had my family over for Christmas dinner. And being involved in municipal politics the way I am, I passed my computer around to my family members because I wanted my entire family to fill out this survey. So now you have the same IP address being seen as doing it, but you have 30 or 40 people that were in the room doing it separately. How do you go about proving that, Adam? Right? You can't. During these public consultations and open houses, we've heard people say, not everybody has internet. Not everybody has Facebook. Not everybody can use a computer. Again, the IP address, people that want 7 or people that want 5 could go and do this all day long. But, people said, if you mailed it out to every resident in Richmond County, then you're solving that problem, right? And, again, lessons learned. I tell everybody, you don't, people say you learn from your mistakes, Adam. I wouldn't say they were mistakes. I would say that we're learning from the experience. This was the first experience we've had with a boundary review.
Yes.
And you take the steps like the open houses. The open houses did turn it around, and hearing from the public did turn that around. And hopefully next time in 2030,
Yes.
in 8 years' time, hopefully we learn and we say, okay, we're gonna, we mail out tax assessments and tax bills to every resident in Richmond County. I'm sure we could do it for a boundary review, right? So again, steps you take to improve the process, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So wrapping this up, well, what do you take away from all this, both as a councillor and as a member of this municipal council? What has this process showed you, not only about how invested the public is in all of this, but how you work with your fellow councillors to try to reach a solution?
So for me, Adam, 2 things that you will remember from the debate in the 2020 campaign.
Yes.
I said here in this building at Telile that if I had advice for all the candidates and all the councillors would be to not stop campaigning after the election. I've stayed true to that, and I'm very proud to say that it looks like the rest of my fellow councillors have stayed true to that as well. So the vote is never 5-0. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's 4-1, sometimes it's 3-2. But if the vote was 5-0 100% of the time, Adam, people would be questioning us, saying, something's up there.
Yeah.
So on a vote-to-vote basis, in every topic that comes around our table, we campaign our thoughts and our ideas and our opinions on that particular topic. And then we vote on it. And then from there, we move on to the next topic in a respectful manner. There's no animosity, there's no bad blood. So for me, I take that away from that situation, and I'm glad that we found some common ground. And the January 31st meeting, the vote was unanimous. It was 5-0 to send this recommendation to the UARB board. So I'm thankful for the work ethic of my fellow councillors. To go further when it comes to the public consultations, I also said during my campaign, Adam, that it's not my vote. It's our vote, right? And it's my district's vote. It's for me to represent all the residents of District 1.
Yes.
We can't all crowd into the council chambers when there's a vote that has to take place. My voice is the voice that has to be heard for all of us. That's why I felt it was important for these public consultations to take place. Beforehand, again, people were just filling out this survey and clicking on some numbers. It was like, we want more representation. We want 7. We don't want, we want more representation. But when we held the public consultations in the open houses, you then find out that the 7 was picked, but people didn't want community division. And people didn't want the cost, which is an average of $45,000 per councillor,
Yes.
associated with 2 extra councillors. So people wanted 7 and more representation People didn't want community division. People didn't want the extra cost, which led us to what we came up with here. No community division, no extra councillors, working the way we're working today, working together, respecting the process, respecting each other around the table. And I'm glad we had those open dialogues with the people, because I think, Adam, it's very important to engage the public. I can't knock on everybody's door, Adam, when someone is asking for $200 for a recreation event or a recreation team going to play provincial baseball or something. I can't knock on every door and say, you think it's a good idea for me to give this $250? People have to trust that I'll make that right decision and support the people, I should support, and groups and organizations around this community. That's I will take that responsibility, and chances are, Adam, that people would want me to anyway. But when it comes to an important decision like a boundary review, then I feel, like I said from the start, you have to engage the public. Yeah. You have no choice. You have to have some open dialogue. You have to ask these people their opinions. They're the taxpayers. They're the ones that are, they're paying your wages. They have a voice just like me. They have a voice just like the warden or the deputy warden or Councillor Melanie or Councillor Dignan. Their voices were heard October 17th of 2020. Their voices should be heard for those 4 years, right? So I'm proud of that process, Adam. I'm glad we did it because it brought us to this recommendation, which I think is going to be good for all of us. And I'm proud of the respect and the work ethic of our council team.
Well, we greatly appreciate you coming and sharing your voice here for Telile's Roundtable series. We've covered a lot of ground. Shawn, did you want to add anything else about all this before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, just Adam, like I say, I just want to thank you and the staff here at Telile for all the coverage that you give our residents here in Richmond County when it comes to Richmond Municipality and politics and the decisions that are made around the table. So I want to thank you and everybody here at Telile for your coverage.
Well, we appreciate that very much, and obviously we look forward to our next conversation. But in the meantime, District 1 Councillor Shawn Samson, thank you for joining me today on Telile's Roundtable.
Yeah, thanks very much, Adam. Thanks for having me.
No trouble. And now, to wrap up this week's edition of Roundtable, we have just a couple more items from the Richmond Municipal Council table. Here is some discussion on a storm policy that's been developed for Richmond County, specifically dealing with the closure of municipal facilities in storm conditions. We're going to see some of the discussion from recent council meetings about this new policy, and then we'll hear from Richmond Warden Amanda Mombourquette following the January 23rd regular council meeting.
The committee met on December 12th, 2022. The committee discussed the storm policy. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Bylaw Policy Committee and that council advance the storm policy to a regular council meeting for adoption.
Okay, could I have a seconder on that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Shawn Samson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, that motion's carried.
Is there any kind of highlights that you can give us in terms of what the county may be doing differently from here on in? What exactly are we looking at?
So really, it really wasn't representing a major shift. It was really about putting our practice into policy. And so I think, when you look at the kind of the notifications and when the call is made to decide to close, they're things that the county has been doing in most cases for a very long time. But we just really wanted to cement them in policy so that the public knows what to expect, and so that staff, whether they've been here a long time or new staff, would know what the expectation is as well, not to mention councillors, right? So, yeah, so it's really just about putting our practices into good policy.
And that's about the closure of municipal buildings?
Yeah, and other assets, so for instance, the arena or the waste management facility, et cetera, yeah.
Just on board since this past September, so your thoughts on his participation here?
I'm super excited to have an emergency management coordinator in place. I mean, this has been a priority that we have discussed for quite some time now, and we had an EMC in place for a period of time. It really wasn't a permanent position, hoping to make this into one. And so we're looking forward to him being really proactively engaged with, on the emergency management side, but also on the fire services side. There's a lot of work for us to do, making sure that, emergency management planning is also done in an age-friendly way, you know, that all segments of our population are considered when doing this planning. Not to mention, of course, you add the layers around climate adaptation and changes and impacts. You know, we didn't take too long to stand up our emergency management center when Hurricane Fiona came barreling right through Richmond County, and we were so fortunate during that disaster. But it's not to say we're going to be that fortunate in every one. So I think we need to be doing a better job, and I'm really excited. Steve comes with a great set of qualifications and enthusiasm for the job.
Comfort centers included in this storm policy?
No, so the storm policy would be kind of separate from the emergency management piece completely. So, but yeah, so comfort centers would definitely be part of our emergency management planning, yeah.
And as we wind down this edition of Roundtable with another look back at one more recent item from the Municipal Council table, here's some discussion about some potential subdivisions happening in St. Peter's that could help develop the housing market in that village. You're going to hear the original council discussion, and then we'll get some comments from Richmond Warden Amanda Mombourquette.
The next item for second reading and approval was the proposed land use bylaw amendment to rezone the portions of properties identified as PID 750-86868, 7513-6218, 7505-2530, and 7521-9568, and 750-86397 from the residential rural R2 zone to the residential village R1 zone to allow for smaller lot subdivision. So we would need a motion to that effect, please.
I'll move that.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
All right, thank you, Councillor Melanie Samson. Any further discussion on that item? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. The other development, I guess, related issue that we dealt with this evening was to look at the rezoning of properties in the St. Peter's area to change the designation for the zoning from, I think it's a rural residential to more village residential. And basically, you know, the major impact that would have would be on lot sizes required because, of course, there being water and sewer services in that community, you don't need as large a lot. And so that was given second reading approval this evening as well.
Was there anything in particular happening in the village that led to that coming forward?
Well, you know, I think it's a local property owner. There's no shortage of discussion these days in the media and at kitchen tables and at, you know, every gathering place about how there's such a need for more housing and new developments are so needed right now. So I'm very enthusiastic about seeing this kind of rezoning occurring because I think it is planning for the future. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there, but exciting to see planning for more housing coming to the region for sure.
And there you have it, folks. That wraps up this week's edition of Roundtable. Thank you for tuning in, and a big thank you to my interview guests this week, Amanda Mombourquette and Shawn Samson. Special thanks to my colleagues here at Telile Community Television, Nick Boudreau, Callen Cowan, and Becky Bourinot, for filming and formatting the footage that was used in this week's episode. If you have any thoughts or comments about what you've seen over the past hour on Roundtable, or just some suggestions for future editions of the show, I'd love to hear them. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, and you can reach me by email using the address adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile Community Television directly with your thoughts and suggestions. The station phone number in Arichat is 902-226-1928, and the best email address to use is telile@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and our YouTube channel features every single episode of Roundtable, including this one, as well as Telile 24/7, our sister program, and individual interviews and segments from these shows. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you once again for joining me for Roundtable this week. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.